Hi guys, I'm Ryan Newsman and welcome to my fly tying channel. If you haven't already done so, consider hitting the subscribe button down below. That'll keep you up to date with everything as I upload it. My channel already contains hundreds of videos covering a wide range of both patterns and techniques, from the basic to the more advanced. So without delay, let's get on with the show. Okay guys, so we're going to tie a white dog nobbler. So this is an old rainbow pattern, and I'm using here a standard B830 size 8 from Camazan. But I'm going to use a nano silk, black nano silk here, because it's strong. So putting the silk onto the hook shank, and then I've got a cocktail stick here and I have a little bit of super glue set out here on a little bit of metal, or you can put it on a bit of tin foil. Stops it from drying out so quickly, and I'm just going to coat it with that. So being a dog nobbler, it is weighted so that it dives. So I'm going to use lead wire here, and I'm going to do maybe the front third of the hook in that, but I then will nip it off shy of the eye. So I still want to have a sort of a bit of a taper to the head, so I want it to be able to dive off the end of our leaded section. So having put the lead on, I'll then just take the cocktail stick again and run another little bit of super glue across the leaded portion, and then wrap forward. Now when you're wrapping across it, what you need to do is wrap across it in 2 or 3 turns so that it traverses multiple wraps of lead, otherwise it'll just dive in between them. Then I can go back, and the fact that I've got these wraps going across, these will stop these wraps from diving into the lead as well, and it'll give us a little bit of support for our dressing across the top of that. So, white dog nobbler, simple enough fly to tie. What I'm going to use is white marabou. So I'm going to nip out the tail to the point where it's around about the length of the tail. So I was taking about the length of the tail out of it. So therefore, when I pull this forward, I'm going to get a sort of a tapered bunch. Now the length of the tail is up to yourself, but generally I would have it about 1.5 to 2 times the length of the body. So I've measured it up here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start it tied off here right at the back of my lead portion. Therefore this will mean that I have no step in the body. Holding the tail back, I'll then wrap back over it until I get to a point that's about level with the barb of my hook. I'll then slip that off. So that could do as a tail itself, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a strand of like a pearl mirage. I'm going to double it over so I get 2 strands. I'm going to lay that in so it's the same length as the tail and tie across it. Then I'll take these tag ends out and pull that back, folding it over and tying across it. Then I will trim those off, and essentially that means now that we have 4 strands of pearl on top of the tail. So that's the way you want it. You can leave it like that. The other option is that you could take your marabou, rip a section off out of it. Again, we've got these natural tips to it, and then I would set that on top and measure it out so that it is the same length as our other tail, and then that will enclose those bits of flash in the center of our tail. And then you notice I slid that up and I wrapped it up again until I hit the back of our lead and then I'll trim that off, and that will leave us a nice smooth underbody as such to tie the fly. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my cocktail stick again, a little bit of glue, and run that on the underside, and that's going to seep through the wrappings down to secure all to the hook, and then I want a bit onto the marabou as well, and then I'll tie into that. And the idea with this is that it will soak into the marabou and therefore make it impermeable, because marabou in my experience tends to soak up water, and then if you leave your fly, if you fish your fly, leave it in your box, then it can rust the hook, because the marabou itself will wick the water up into it. So if you put a bit of varnish or a bit of super glue into it, it stops that, but you don't want it to get past this point. You don't want it to head back into the tail. So next we want to tie in a rib. I'm going to use a silver oval for this, and I'm going to tie it in on the underside. It doesn't really matter where you tie it in. But we're going to have a body of white chenille for this. So if I take my chenille, I can strip off a little bit of the core and tie it back until it meets the base of the tail, and then I'm going to wrap this forward to try and create a nice, even, tight chenille body. I get to the front here, I'm going to leave about a quarter or so of the shank bare to take the dog Nobbler type head. A couple of turns across that, hold it under tension. I'm going to snip that off. Now I've left a couple of mils here on this side, and I'm just going to then pull that. That'll expose the core, and then I can tie just the core down without creating an unevenness or a bump on one side. So our rib now. So we have two ways of doing this. We can either go in the opposite way to that we wrapped our chenille on, or we can go in the same direction as it. But if we go in the same direction, it might dive down in. Now it's already hard for it to see it because of the nature of the chenille anyway, but if we're going to go this way, what we need to do is do maybe just 3 turns or so across it. You won't see too much of it unless you use a very tight sort of suede chenille, but it will also just strengthen up the body a little bit. Okay, so now the dog Nobbler head, which is peacock herl. So I'm taking 3 strands of peacock herl here, and I'm going to tie them in here on my side. I'm leaving the tail ends of them pointing back that way, and then I'm going to trim this down. So traditionally that would have been just wrapped on, I suppose, but I'm going to try and make it a little bit stronger. So I have here a precision super glue gel applicator, and I'm going to get a little blob of that coming out the end of it, and I'm run it down about 1.5 inches or so of my tying thread there. And then I'm going to wrap this forward. I want it to go off the front of my step, and then a couple of turns at that there will even the step out, and then I'm taking it back to the rear. So there is essentially a little layer of super glue gel on that, but quite thin. So I'll flip my fly over now to where my tying thread is coming off at the same point, or the same point as my peacock is tied in, and that way I can now twist this. It might be difficult for you to see, but basically I'm twisting it around the thread, and that'll tighten this up into like a dubbing rope. And ripping the peacock off helps with this, because the little twirly ends that are on this help you to catch it and to turn it around. So once this starts to tighten itself up, you can see it just create like a rope. We can start to wrap that forward. As you wrap, it'll become a little bit looser, so you want to tighten it up again, but you have to be careful you don't over tighten it or it will snap on itself. Once we come off the front, we then start to go backwards again. And to finish the fly, we're now going to take it forward until we come off the front again. And once we do that, I will let it go loose and let these unravel. When I had twisted, the dubbing rope as such as I've made then has a core of my tying thread, so every wrap is tying down all of the peacock herl that is wrapped around it. So that gives it added strength, so that even if a tooth does rip a little bit of it, it shouldn't totally unravel. So this is unraveled now back to where my last wrap was. I can then wrap across it, fold it back on itself, tie it in and trim it off. And that has made like a tapered peacock herl head to our fly. Make a small neat head. And a couple of finishes. Trim that off. I'm going to take my cocktail stick. I'm going to dip it into my super glue. You can use varnish if you want. And that just allows you finish that off. So that is our, well, I suppose it's another one of the blast from the past flies. So that is our white dog nobbler. So hopefully you like what you see. If you did, give us a like, subscribe, tell your friends, and until next time, tight lines, and thanks for watching.